The UBcast highlights the amazing work that people like you are doing to make the world a better place. It is a place for innovators, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and changemakers to meet and talk about their passions, their experiences, their opinions, and their challenges. My name is Jack Polithon, and this is Changemakers. Roman,
Yes.
who are you and what is the change that you're making in the world right now?
So yeah, my name is Roman Vakilitabar, and who am I? I'm a curious individual who likes finding new opportunities to create an impact in unexpected ways. I've been really passionate and excited about the realm of technology and media as a conduit to communicate that impact. And but I think deep down beneath it all, I'm an artist. Um, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend. I feel like those are way more meaningful than anything work related. But I mean, I do pride myself in the work that I do. And the impact that I'm really trying to focus on these days is how do we look at the landscape of our country and find common ground across lines of difference. I feel like our country has gotten so polarized, and we're falling into kind of a dangerous place of hyper partisanship and a more deep focus on the differences that exist between us than really trying to acknowledge the commonalities that exist between us in ways that can really absolve a lot of the conflict and the anxiety and the discord that exists between different groups. And so over the last couple of years, I've tried to, so I started Pathos Labs, which is essentially a laboratory focused on finding ways that media and technology can accelerate compassion, can accelerate the rate at which we're finding common ground, can accelerate understanding across lines of difference. And really the goal is, can we use media and technology, these tools that have been kind of weaponized against us in many ways, to spread discord and spread the idea that we're more dissimilar than I think we really are. Can we use those technologies and those mediums to dismantle hatred in our country right now? So it's a little bit about who I am and what I care about.
That is amazing. I mean,
Thanks.
it's really refreshing to hear of someone taking technology and seeing how they can interact with the human experience to make it better. How can we use it as a tool, not just to make money, but to really make people's lives better? Now, one of the questions that came up listening to that's a very complex mission to take on.
Yep.
What inspired that? What in the world inspired you to do this? What was the spark to create this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely many things, kind of a confluence of different experiences and trends that I noticed that kind of scared me, to be honest. Earlier on in college, I was really interested and fascinated by empathy, how to feel empathy when it's difficult, how to understand other people's experiences when their experiences are entirely different than your own. And I ended up kind of going on these or creating these empathy experiments, or going on these empathy journeys where I would force myself to enter a new context and understand people in a way that was radically different than what was that to throw myself in environments where I just had to understand people and meet them where they were at. So some examples of that, I guess. I spent several weeks experiencing homelessness when I was in college. 2 weeks, tried travel across Europe without spending any money, and really put myself in an environment, in a context where I was a stranger, where I was a foreigner, where I had to really subside and subsist off of the generosity of strangers, and where, quite frankly, I was exposed to individuals who had this, whose lives were defined by this homeless experience. And it was a really revelatory journey. And it was really difficult. And so that was one of the experiments. Another, I had backpacked between Israel and Palestine to better understand the conflicts there, and how people feel about those on the other side of the wall. And that was really interesting to see how we tend to otherize people who have different ideas or have different identities, even if they have very similar ideas or beliefs. Just the mere nature of the fact that this conflict has been so deeply seated and so intergenerational was really interesting to me. And so those were the kind of experiments that I had the privilege of creating for myself during summer vacation, for example. And so I just became really interested in this concept of how do we understand people who have very different experiences, and how do we enter their contexts to understand them. And so since then, I realized that that's not very scalable, right? Like it's an individual experience where you have to do that, and it's scary, and it's risky, and it's uncomfortable, and wanted to figure out ways that we could scale similar kinds of experiences, and became really inspired by virtual reality as a mechanism to create that empathy. So we did a little bit of work with VR, and then recently just seeing how in the 2016 election, people on both sides of the political spectrum were espousing a lot of hatred and negativity towards folks on the other side. And that was really concerning to me, because I saw communities and families completely broken and bifurcated based off of political identities. And I feel like it's the biggest threat to our democracy in the United States. So in 2016, I really wanted to figure out how technology more generally, beyond just VR, could be used to help engineer norms that predispose us to compassion rather than divisiveness. And if you look at the media landscape that exists today, I mean, they're optimizing around discord and divisiveness because it sells. And so I have been trying to figure out how can we create some really meaningful, profitable, scalable media content that can not inspire discord and hatred, and illuminate differences, but rather do the opposite. So I've been a little bit more generally focused on technology and media, beyond any kind of technology or media. We're kind of tech and media agnostic, but we've been experimenting with social media strategies. We're doing a feature length film here shortly, and we're also developing some contents for diversity trainers in the country who are really trying to help people think about bias and unconscious bias, the biases that exist deep within us all that a lot of us don't necessarily realize are there. So yeah, that was super long-winded. I apologize.
No. I mean, I'm blown away right now. I mean, we've spoken before. I know a little bit about your company, but really, the experience behind it is truly amazing to me, and again, inspiring in the way of I don't think a lot of people in our generation right now are thinking about these problems this way. We saw what happened in the election. We see what's happening in Israel and Palestine, and it's, oh, that's such a massive problem. How could we ever how could we ever even understand that? And you took it upon yourself to understand that by going and experiencing in a really deep and impactful way, it seems like. And it's really inspirational to hear that you took that experience and wanted to be able to scale it and are now figuring out how to do that. So,
well, thanks, man. No, I appreciate it. And yeah, I guess like that all came from just the fact that I wasn't a very good like college student, right? Where, you know, I loved learning, loved learning, but I like learned through experience, through challenging myself. And I wasn't necessarily the kind of student that loved going to class and taking notes. And so, yeah, I think everything that you're doing at Ubiquity is really cool and inspiring. And I'm really excited to hear about new models propagating focus on delivering education in a different way. And yeah, and I'm lucky that I didn't necessarily, because I feel like it's easy to lose yourself in a university setting when that's the expectation. You're supposed to perform, you're supposed to graduate in 4 years, you're supposed to find a great stable job afterwards. You know, like I feel like people who don't really fit that mold or who don't really want to take that path like feel lost. And for me, I'm lucky that I had a supportive community, that I was you know, constantly inspired by podcasts I was listening to or inspirational people that I was coming across online, or books that I was reading that really inspired me to take my own journey. So it wouldn't have been possible had it not been for like myself giving myself the permission to make learning what I wanted it to be rather than what people told me it was supposed to be about. So
that's
all to say, I'm reflecting the compliments back onto you and the work that you're doing.
well, thank you. And that's what we're trying to do. We're helping people realize that their education doesn't have to live within a box, physically,
Totally.
figuratively. We want people to think for themselves. We want to be able to teach people and give them the tools to think for themselves, find what they're truly passionate about, help them figure out how they want to make a change in the world, and again, arm them with the skill set to be able to make that a reality. I think that's a good segue into sort of the next question of the things that you've done in the world are truly amazing. And I think people would be curious of what skills do you see that you have that made this change possible, that makes possible what you do every day?
Ooh, man. So I guess like the first one that comes to mind doesn't sound like a skill, but I think it really is how naive I am in a way where, you know, a lot of the things I've attempted in my career, so to speak, have been just from a place of curiosity, not really knowing whether it's possible or not, but feeling like it's worth it to give it a shot. And, you know, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, what you're doing is hard. It's not scalable. It's impossible in a way. And just like, I think just being naively, like overly optimistic, has been the only reason why I've kind of continued upon this path. And I'm like really thankful for that. So I think that's one. I think two is not so much a skill, but more of like a characteristic, that I would use to define me. I'm like, I have a lot of ADD, you know, like right now I'm actually talking to you, Jack, in a tree. I just like climbed a tree and I'm sitting at the top of this tree talking to you right now. I think that has been really helpful because I feel like creativity comes at the nexus of two completely unrelated industries or schools of thought, and connecting two connecting two things that haven't been connected before. Like I think that that's where the opportunity really lies, and I feel like I've been pretty good at connecting unrelated disciplines, largely because of how I'm constantly exploring and I'm constantly curious, and I'm like over the weekend, I'm reading different articles and trying to soak up different things that may seemingly have nothing to do with the work that I'm doing, but I always seem to find some really interesting uh, cross sections that I can really apply to the work that I'm doing. So I think like that's something also that I really appreciate about myself, is just that willingness to explore, to try things, to not take myself too seriously, to not be confounded by like the social norms in a way, where I feel like that's a really liberating thing, is not to really care what other people think of you. And so I think like the confluence of those things has really been instrumental in me being where I'm at, the friendships that I've been able to cultivate over time that have been so meaningful to me, and the work that I'm doing. It's cool to be doing something where I have on a day-to-day basis, I find myself talking to the coolest people. I had a conversation yesterday with conflict resolution expert at MIT, who's written several books about dignity. And we had a really awesome conversation. And afterwards, I hung up and I was like, I have no idea why she would have wanted to chat with me. But it's cool that we're having a meaningful conversation. And riffing with one another. So yeah, I guess like I'm kind of talking in circles here, but yeah, I think those are like the traits that I see in myself that I'm most proud of in a way, and traits that I think have been most beneficial and valuable, to be able to do the work that I'm doing today. Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome. And you weren't talking in circles. I think that really painted a picture of what you're doing, but really who you are, because I think that is at the core of what you're bringing to the world right now. You're taking your experiences that you've lived from your own curiosity in your life, and I think talking about being naive is really important, because it's so easy to let society, again, try to put you in a box or tell you, no, you can't do this. And sometimes it takes a little bit of that naivety to say, no, I think I can. And I
For
think,
sure. No, yeah. And so many people have told me, like, wouldn't it be advantageous for you to get a graduate degree before you start doing this, right? Like, what kind of authority on the matter do you have? What's your credibility or your clout to be doing this? Like, shouldn't you first like get a PhD in this before you start attempting, or don't you think it would be advantageous for you to be working within like a media lab somewhere? And those are like interesting questions, and like sometimes I think about like, okay, that could be really cool to work with some professors who have more experience in this than I do. But it's really like I think a lot of people challenge me on where I'm at and like the big questions that I'm trying to ask through my work. And for some reason, it never seems like the questions that I'm asking always seem to be too big, too outside of my realm or zone of expertise. And I agree with them, right? Like, I'm totally a novice or a noob as it comes to a lot of these questions. But like last Saturday, I was at a coffee shop and I was flipping through these PDFs, these dissertations from different academics who have published some really interesting, who've collected really interesting data and have published some really fascinating reports on different questions that I'm curious about. And like I'm trying to get there, right? And I'm trying to put in the work, and I'm truly coming from a place of curiosity and naivete in a way too, of wanting to figure out what has maybe taken researchers 10 years to figure out in a much accelerated at a much accelerated pace. So yeah.
I mean, but you're doing it. And I think, there's a lot of inspiration in this conversation today, but you're doing it and you're going for it, and you're not taking no as an answer. You're not taking people questioning you as a roadblock. You seem to really accept that, accept where you are, accept your place in the world, but still you you move ahead. And I think that's such an important lesson of having that positivity in life. And yeah, again, that's,
Well, thanks, man. Thanks. I appreciate hearing that.
I hope our students can connect with this. And that's actually, I think we can wrap up with that of, if people want to connect with you, if people want to connect with your work, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, man. Totally. I'm always looking for ideas, individuals who want to collaborate on a project, individuals who may be interested in helping out with some projects that we have going on. So yeah, it'd be awesome to connect with your students or your community or whoever. Would love to ask big questions with them. And yeah, they can hit me up. My email address is my first name, Romain, at Pathos, Pathos Labs, labs.org. So no, super excited to connect with whoever and continue the conversation with them.
Awesome. Roman, thank you so much for talking with me.
Dude,
This is
a pleasure, man. A pleasure.
And
Thanks.
yeah, we hope to see you around Ubiquity more.
And I'm honored to have been a part of this. It's really cool to hear what you're building out at Ubiquity, and excited to hear about the paths that students there are taking to have an impact in the world.
For a course related to this conversation, we suggest that you check out Change Your Thinking, Change the World. You can find a link in the bio below.